Hi, I'm Grant Stevens.
And I'm Kris Bernier.
And we're the Two Investment Guys. This week, Kris and I want to talk a little bit more about the markets. When we look at the indices from around the globe, year to date, everybody's in negative territory, anywhere between 5 and 15%. The turmoil in the markets has certainly intensified and may have culminated with the recent credit rating issue around the United States and the S&P rating there. We're going to talk a little bit about that because there are some important dynamics at work here. Kris, why don't we just talk a little bit about what that meant to the market first of all?
Sure. Well, S&P had warned some time ago that they were looking at the situation in the U.S. and their debt rating. And I think it's culminated with a downgrade from a AAA to a AA plus as a result of the politicians not being able to get some resolution and some plan in place to deal with the deficit and the long-term debt. And you've seen countries like China, which hold a lot of the U.S. debt, have actually scolded the U.S. on how they've handled this situation.
Yeah, you know, Kris, interesting that two of the other major rating agencies in the world did not do a downgrade there.
That's right. In fact, reaffirmed their credit rating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the other interesting points is to talk a little bit about S&P. Now, keep in mind, this is the same rating agency that rated mortgage-backed securities in 2008 AAA. They rated Lehman Brothers AAA right until their assignment into bankruptcy. And they also rated Enron, there's a name, from earlier in the decade. That had a rating of AAA prior to its assignment into bankruptcy. So look, not to mock the rating agencies, but this is a little bit perhaps ahead of itself, and it was more about, as you said, that they haven't, the policymakers haven't made any meaningful headway in terms of dealing with the debt issues, and the S&P telegraphed that if that was the case, they were going to put it on a downgrade.
That's right, and I think the pendulum has just swung too far the other way, like it usually does. They were severely criticized in the past for these other ratings, and now they've probably gone a step too early. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and the interesting thing is that on that debt rating downgrade, we saw money flow out of the equity markets and into the very instrument that was being downgraded, and that's U.S. Treasuries.
There's some irony in that, Kris. You know, the irony is twofold. One is there's China scolding the U.S. about the state, you know, of their credit markets. This coming from a country that is relatively newly formed in terms of capital market development, but they're the biggest creditor by far. That's why what they say does matter. But also that all the money that came out of the stock market as a result of the turmoil went into the treasuries, which were downgraded. So another interesting point is on the corporate debt side, which is something Kris and I have talked about a lot, is those numbers continue to improve, where we just had the numbers in July where the default rate was 1.9%, down from 2.2% in July, down from 5.5% a year ago. So the corporate story continues to get stronger and stronger and stronger, and yet the government story just making no headway, and in fact probably getting a little bit worse.
It is overshadowing things for sure.
Yeah.
And I think we need to keep that in mind, that where we're invested is in corporations, corporate earnings, profitability, continue to improve, as does, as you said, the default situation. Now, one of the things with these headlines is that sentiment tends to be quite negative, and that's really what's been driving the market, is the negative consumer sentiment around all of the inability of policymakers to get things done in an efficient and timely manner.
Yeah, you know, and we get back to the, so what should someone be doing here? Well, Kris, you and I have advocated for a long time about balance, diversification, and yield in your portfolio. And that won't necessarily make the portfolio immune to any market volatility, but it certainly gets you through these tough times. And then when we get mispriced securities like we have to some degree at the moment, good opportunity to take some of that cash and maybe just pick away at some pieces of the portfolio that you want to improve. Not a wholesale dive into the market or type of approach, just a methodical, go back to the plan, make sure it makes sense for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Stick with quality, focus on dividends, and if you're not using that income, look to reinvest those dividends over time. I want to thank you again for your questions and comments. Please keep them coming. You can contact Grant and I at TwoInvestmentGuys.com.
Join us next time. We're going to continue our discussion around the markets and some insight in terms of the dynamics going on there. So until then, I'm Grant.
And I'm Kris.
And we're the Two Investment Guys.